Thank you for coming. What we're going to do first of all is give you a little bit of a rundown on where we're at. My name's Andy McFarlane. For those of you that don't know, I'm the chairman. First of all, I'm just going to hand over to Dan for a little bit of housekeeping around safety and exits and so on, and then Dan and I will run a dual session, and with Minister Smith due here in about half an hour. 20 minutes, right.
Housekeeping, guys. Fire out one of the clearly marked exits, please, as orderly fashion. Earthquake, I think we're going to sit still until the shaking stops. If we think it was big enough for a tsunami, we're actually going to go all the way up Taranaki Street. So let's hope that doesn't happen. And armed robbery we have here, we'll just everybody remain calm. All right. Okay. I'm just find my clicker. So we're going to whip through this because we're already a little behind, and the minister will be here at 9. I hope is that sound coming through okay like that? Yep. Closer, more, better, better. Okay. So I'm going to start with some pretty pictures because that's what I do best, and we're going to run through just sort of what's happened since we were last together in Dunedin 12 months ago. What's happened in the industry? So very quickly, I won't read through all those things because I've got a picture for each one. Deer slaughter we'll start with. This is quite a big change. You'll see that slope down the end there is kind of got quite steep. So we've dropped slaughter numbers a fair bit, which is a bit painful. Where's that coming from? Here's that slaughter broken into male and female, and you can see what's actually happening there. Is whereas on the previous slide it looked like we had a nice even period there for the last 4 or 5 years, evenness, just above 400,000, so it looked all good. Wasn't all good because what you actually had was a massive increase in the number of hinds that made up that 400,000 kill. So what's happened over the last 12 months is that those hinds have stopped being killed. So that's a good thing. And one more slide there shows that's the ratio of male to female in the kill, and you can see that that's heading south at a reasonably rapid rate, and how far down that goes I don't know, but we think for the year ended September this year it'll be about 47% female kill, which suggests a pretty strong retention and growth in the industry, which is great. In the short term though, that switch between liquidation of our capital stock and retention makes a pretty big impact on what's happening at the slaughter plants and what's happening in our levy-funded organisations. In the slaughter plants, it's been pretty tough to keep people gainfully employed there, and people would have seen that there's been a little bit of change in the capacity in the industry over the last little while. For DINS, it makes life a bit tough as well, especially when we're trying to fund a major project like P2P, which you'll hear about later on. And we were already spending more money than we had coming in. So just one quick comment on this, and I'm not going to go through my budgets with you, but the board's told me pretty clearly that DINS won't be looking for any more money from farmers this year by way of levies or anything, so I've got a little bit of a cloth-cutting exercise to do over the next year or so, shall we say. How are people feeling? So pricing over the last year or so, it's obviously going in a pretty good direction. You guys will be more familiar with this than I am. In fact, I think I've missed off a week there. It's gone up. I think the latest average schedule's something north of 850. One thing I do want to just point out, a really quite significant change over the last couple of years, is the way that this curve of the schedule has changed. So back a couple of years ago, massive difference between off-season and on-season and chilled season price. That gap between off and peak season is really reducing, and that for me is evidence of some pretty impressive market diversification work that's been going on with our venison exporters, who are finding markets who are willing to pay reasonable prices year round rather than such a heavy reliance on that European game season. How do we compare with other proteins that you could be producing off your land? Very quickly, so that's the change over a year, and you can see that the venison price up the top, the purple one, has basically maintained its difference from lamb, probably about $2.50 at the start and not far off it at the end, maybe $3 to $2.50. And what we haven't got in there is the inexorable rise of that black line again up to $6.75. But things are in pretty good shape, relatively speaking. What's happened on farm? Well, we don't get many data showing what's happened on farm, but here's one that I can show. These are carcass weights coming through the plants. Great change over the last 12 months. What's caused that? There'll be a whole lot of factors, obviously, so I suspect the change in the kill ratio male-female will have affected that. The change in the schedule curve, so better prices later in the year so you can hold deer for longer, would have created greater carcass weights. I'm also pretty confident that there's genuine productivity improvements, so farmers are doing a better job feeding and breeding their deer in there as well. And I think if you look at the female line going up, that's a pretty good indication that the animals are actually bigger. It's not just a mix issue. Velvet. Reese was unhappy that I put this slide up. It shows that these are estimated numbers, so we don't actually have the full year of velvet data available to us, but this is what we think it's going to pan out at. So about 650 tonnes, which is another sort of small incremental step on what we've been doing for the last few seasons. And pricing took a bit of a tumble, so we lost about $20 off that velvet price, which is disappointing. And Reese will obviously spend some time talking about that later on, but I guess one thing he's not going to say is that we thought that volume had a big impact on price. We don't think that was the core issue. Livestock numbers. This one always depresses me a little bit. Deer numbers, along with other dry stock, continue to decline. And a couple of things to remember about this chart is that the most recent data shown here is year to June 2016, so nearly a year old now. So it's a fair bit out of date. I also have some pretty major question marks about the data, but we won't get into that at the moment. I guess if you're going to draw a conclusion out of this, it's deer farmer positivity, along with beef farmer positivity, has been pretty good the last couple of seasons, but it seems to take a while to turn that ship around. So for that confidence to translate into those livestock numbers looking like they're going up in the census data. Where to next? I'll hand back to the boss.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, those livestock numbers, of course, in the meat world, you always get a lag of about 1 year before retention feeds into extra breeding stock. So that's why the numbers for 17 will look quite a bit different to 16. You'll recall that in the Methven conference in 2015, when we were in probably a lot more difficult position than we are now, I put up a couple of slides based on the Jim Collins business concepts, and one was the hedgehog concept, which is just looking at the intersection of where you can be the best in the world at, and we definitely believe that the deer industry we are the best in the world at producing venison, and one of the world's best red meat producers. There's no questioning the passion of this industry, which is why our industry-led initiative is called Passion to Profit, and what drives the economic engine. So that's the profit bit, which is obviously production times the margin per kilo, but doing it in the right manner. And the intersection in that, which is what our old strategy was at that time around profitably growing and marketing the world's best red meat and velvet, we've slightly aligned that now to our key strategy point as premium positioning for our products. And then following on from that, the flywheel effect, and we just talked a little bit about this over the business breakfast. I think it's quite important just to go back to there in terms of where we were, because we were on the left-hand side at that time, the left-hand side of that curve, where everybody had their shoulder to the wheel, but there weren't many results showing up. A hell of a lot of hard work going on. The steps forward were there, but the accumulation of visible results were not there. 2 and 3 years ago. You know, we weren't seeing it showing up in the profitability. We weren't seeing it show up in product prices other than velvet. But of course, when you do get an accumulation of visible results like we have now, people get more energised. Down at the bottom there, they get more energised. They start to line up, and we saw a great example of that yesterday at the Advanced Party Day with 60 or so young farmers there who are asking, they're demanding more answers, they're hungrier for information. But of course, we've only done 1 360, so I would argue where we are today, we've done 1 360 of that flywheel, and we've got to go around a few more times, and you can't stop pushing. But at least we have got round once, and we're starting to see some momentum. Because the reality of life, and I am going to just be, you know, a little bit negative for a second at that time, this is what people were saying, this is what we defined. We had lost at that time a significant part of the market premium we used to enjoy over lamb. And we don't want to be too far away from lamb because we want all red meat to succeed, but we also need to maintain a premium. We'd relied too much on being a game season product in the hunting season, which made us too dependent on one market. We hadn't differentiated farm venison from wild game in that market, and we hadn't committed to long-term supply arrangements. So we had some, you know, tough stuff to do, which meant we had to get back around that curve. So now that we are, and I know there's a lot of jet boat fans in the audience, so I thought I'd put this up. You know, now that we're up and planing, you know, what are we doing? Well, you know, in venison, I know we've seen some benefits of shorting the market in a little bit, but we do know we have got a plan, and a couple of months ago, the US overtook Germany as the biggest market in the world. So a big shift of the dial towards alternative markets. We've developed an alternative market even in our traditional market, being the Benelux, and the processor marketing groups have done an excellent job of that, and we've got more chilled rather than frozen. In velvet, you know, you saw Dan's figures going well. And on farm, we're seeing some real on-farm evidence of what I would call the demand-led culture rather than the supply, the push culture. So the demand-led culture is what asks people to demand answers, to do things, to ask hard questions, and actually get out there proactively and do things, rather than sit back passively and wait for the industry or researchers or processor marketers to shove stuff at them. And so that big change in hunger that's occurring behind the farm gate is a critical success factor to where this industry's going. And at DINS, from an organisational point of view, the discipline in that, and we do have to be disciplined, about getting better at delivering the services we need to do the value for money. So Dan's got a job, everybody in the organisation's got a job. You know, it's the heading dog approach, where you're just quietly getting out there and guiding people to make sure we deliver impact at the right time. So the key thing is the industry is up on a plane, and we just need to make sure that we don't go up a blind braid, because this industry is littered with examples. You know, the meat industry is littered with examples of where you can find yourself up the creek without a paddle. And so what's the challenge that I believe we need to look at now? Because when things are going well, it's easy to take your foot off the accelerator. We do need to stay highly attuned to the threats of our industry, our profitability, and our social structure. And the social structure is making sure we put the young people into the industry to keep that momentum and keep that hunger. Because the danger and the risks are greatest when all's going well, and the opportunities are greatest and the risks are least when it wasn't. And so the biggest opportunities we had were 3 or 4 years ago. Our challenge now is to keep the momentum going. And so and I'm just going to finish off by identifying a few rocks in the river, potential rocks in the river that I think we need to guard against in the next 3 years. The first is, sorry, in case you haven't seen that. Sorry, I'll just leave it there. So the rocks in the river is what we'd call hubris born of success, and that is thinking that success will continue automatically in covering up poor performance, making excuses for our own poor performance. We need to guard against that. We need to guard against easier cash which is there now, eroding necessary cost disciplines, cost of production, making sure that EBITDA per kilo of product we produce maintains itself at a good level and not spending for the sake of spending. Failing to maintain strong leadership teams, and the DFA have got a key role in that. Failure to do the right thing in areas such as animal welfare, environmental management, and I'm noting the Minister's presence here now. And we need to also note that what we define as doing the right thing may vary from the definition of the public, and we need to make sure that we get the public definition and our definition better aligned. We also need to make sure that poor communication that can erode trust along the value chain doesn't occur. So these rocks all represent areas that could prevent industry progress, but not if we identify them in advance. We remain relentless about targeting progress in an integrated manner that involves everybody taking responsibility for their own area for influence. So when I come to the end of my term here, my challenge to us as a sector is to better understand the parts of the value chain that you don't directly influence yourself. Be inquisitive, be respectful of others' efforts, be humble, but like the All Blacks, be relentless in your pursuit of an increasing skill set. And what I see out there at the moment is from all through the value chain, from the market end to the on-farm end, I see a greater hunger to pursue an increasing skill set. And that's a major success factor. It's a soft success factor, but it's real. So I think one of the keys to that is the larger footprint that the industry's occurred around what we'd call leadership teams, whether it be the P2P advisory group that Mandy Bell chairs, the P2P steering group, the NVSB, which has been very proactive in the animal welfare space, the Savannah marketing group, the DINs, the commercial partners, the APs, all of these different initiatives, they all in their own right contribute to the pool of leadership. And that has an impact that we have to be absolutely relentless about carrying on now that we've got that progress. And I thank you for allowing the board to put the strategy in plane that all of you are part of the execution of.